Hey guys, so I'm a little late to this than usual, but I figured some of you probably have like regional level events this weekend, and so I still wanted to provide this where I break down the most played hand traps and staples at the most recent YCS Rio, so hopefully this will be helpful in terms of finalizing your deck list. So before I continue, definitely a big shout out to my sponsors as always, links and discount codes in the description below for Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles as well as supplies. And of course, we always have to shout out YGOProduct.com as well for this kind of video because it always saves me a lot of time to be able to go through the deck list. Now in terms of the YCS top cut for Rio, so really, Snake Eye is still very dominant. You do have Voiceless Voice here. Tenpai Dragon is also up there, and if you saw my most recent regional report breakdown, it's Tenpai Dragon's actually second most at the regional level and probably climbing up as well because the most recent weekend they've been doing really well. And of course, the winner of that YCS was Raphael, so huge congrats to you again, and of course, definitely go check out his YouTube channel. I'll put it down in the description below. So now let's just provide a brief overview on the hand trap and board breaker stats. So for hand traps, median number of 15 in the main deck, which is very high, of course, and part of that is with Tenpai Dragons coming into the mix now. They have notoriously known for a lot of non-engine space, which brings it up even higher because it was already quite high to begin with compared to, let's say, even a couple years ago. Nowadays, it seems like if you're a meta deck, you have to have like, a bunch of non-engine space, and it's just really frightening at a point. In terms of hand traps in the side, a 3 in the side, that kind of went down in this case. I guess they kind of just focus more on the main deck, and in the side there's actually, I think, more floodgates if anything compared to a little bit before. In terms of going second, board breakers in the main deck was about 1.5, which is more or less the same about what it was like at 1 the last time I did this. And in the side was about 4.5, which is technically slightly higher than the 4 the last time we saw this. But again, I think even though the board breaker count did not go up that much in the side, again, I think it's because part of that has to do with like they're playing a little bit more floodgates than they were before. In terms of the most common hand traps, we're going to try to whip through this because, as I mentioned in a few of my past videos, I do have a lot of catching up to do in this current meta, so I'm going to do that actually after this video, so maybe you guys can also help me out in terms of, why certain hand traps are particularly good or bad this format than not, but at the very least, my role is to at least provide you what it is out there. So in terms of most played hand traps, it was actually Imperm. Ash was a very close second. You usually see Imperm up there, but to be first is actually kind of interesting. Of course, it is pretty good against something like, let's say, Snake Eye. But at the same time, I guess with Tenpai Dragons, I'm not sure if it's on its own is good enough. I mean, of course, I'm guessing it's better than Valor because Valor, that main phase restriction actually kind of matters now because Tenpai, of course, they kind of explode in the battle phase. And Imperm doesn't play into talents, which we're going to get to as well. And as I mentioned, Ash, realistically, I don't think it's bad against any deck, right? I mean, it's always been pretty generic, be able to hit most decks, and that's why it's always seen a lot of play. So I think especially like, let's say, Melodious, not that they're tier 1 or anything, in my recent tier list they kind of came to tier 2, but that's another new strategy entering into the mix where they basically have their own brand diffusion, and being able to Ash something like that is always pretty nice as well. You do have Nibiru still seeing pretty good amount of play, which is interesting. I guess it's because Snake Eye is still so dominant. I mean, you don't want to get like Omega Hand moved or something like that, for example. But other than that, I don't actually think it's that great against a lot of the other good decks too, right? For example, you have something like Voiceless Voice, you have something like Tenpai Dragons. Nibiru's not going to be great. Branded notoriously has been, Nibiru's been pretty meh. And then you have some other strategies, right? Like kind of like the older ones that's coming back. Something like, let's say, like Purrely. Nibiru has never been that great against them either. But at the same time, Snake Eye is so dominant, so perhaps we still see a good amount of play there. Valor, effect negation cards like Ghostmourner and Valor, definitely seeing a lot of play nowadays. I just briefly spoke about Valor and the whole main phase thing actually being a drawback, especially in this format with Tenpai, but nonetheless, obviously still important, and a lot of players are playing it and all main decking it if they are playing it. And then you also have Ghost Ogre. This one's always kind of interesting to see because we don't really see it played that much in most of the formats that I've covered. The last time I think where Ghost Ogre was very popular was when the Adventure Token package kind of first came out, and it was really high in usage. Right now, of course, Tenpai Dragon is a key example of, just blowing up that field spell is quite nice. And against, let's say, like Voiceless Voice, Ghost Ogre, I mean, they have a lot of continuous spell traps, so Ghost Ogre will come up. I guess you could say the same thing for like against Yubel as well. Against Branded, Ghost Ogre traditionally was not very good, but to be honest with you, if you Ghost Ogre something like a Cartesia effect, it's actually pretty annoying, so I wouldn't necessarily say that it's dead against them either. And then you have Bestials. I mean, nothing really new. Even though we don't have any like Dragon Lake topping anymore, you're still seeing Bestial play anyways as a side option. You have Ghost Spell as well, which I guess against Tenpai, I mean, they do kind of like recur from grave as well, which can come up. You have something like, I guess, Branded. It's always kind of like hit or miss with that. It's just kind of depends if they have branded loss or not. Otherwise, Ghost Belt can actually be very good. And then of course something like Voiceless Voice, there are some cards you can hit. I do find a lot of times they kind of like chain block the Ghost Belt though, but you know what, I think it's still pretty applicable right now. Droll is interesting of how much it fell down since the last time. They were kind of main decking it though, and I guess, you know, in a format where Droll isn't really seeing a lot of play, then I guess, for example, Dark World topped this event. That's where those kind of decks can shine. So really intimidating in that sense. That's why I'm always paranoid of not siding Droll at the very least, and then you just get like FTK'd or something. Obviously, you don't really want to think that way, especially in a high level tournament. At the same time, I think Droll definitely saw a big decline in play because it's not really that amazing against the top decks right now, other than maybe Voiceless Voice. And then, of course, Shifter. This is something I thought maybe might be a little bit higher because Tenpai Dragons can, of course, play it. You have something like, let's say, Centur-ion, is with their new support, they can also play it. I believe Yubel also can play Shifter as well. And, of course, you have, like, the similar, like, or rather the familiars of, like, Keshtira, Flunder. But, you know what, not seeing too much play right now, but at the same time, you know, it's probably going to stick around. And in terms of the most common side deck staples, we have Cosmic Cyclone at number 1. It's not that uncommon for this to happen. You usually see something like Feather Duster or Cosmic a lot of times. And Cosmic now, especially, we kind of talked about Ghost Ogre and the Field Spell with Tenpai Dragons. So that's always nice now with Cosmic. And of course, you have something like Voiceless Voice, like Yubel. They have a lot of continuous spell traps. And not to mention all the floodgates that are kind of running around, which at least we lost, you know, anti-spell summon limit. Well, anti-spell is still at 1, but I guess it's still kind of nice to have. You do have like Runic Stun, kind of like terrorizing the meta in a way, still at like a tier 2 level. So I think Cosmic is a very, very must. You also have something like Talents. I mean, you have so many hand traps being played right now, as we kind of saw earlier in the video. So Talents definitely can punish your opponents and, you know, hand rip them for even more. And then D-Barrier, don't really like seeing this up here that high. You do see this occasionally from time to time. For example, the last time when Purrely and Branded were very, very high meta contenders, you saw a lot of this being seen play. And of course, that's when Labrynth was also like a clear tier 1 deck as well. But now, you know, you have something like, let's say, Tenpai, you can call Synchro, you have Voiceless for Ritual, Branded, and I don't know, Melodious Fusion. So it's really being out there. And Purrely, I guess, with Delicious Tattoo, you know, it's a little bit more popular again, you know, with Xyz. And so, you know, it's actually pretty useful right now and very, very strong. I was hoping they would actually ban this card, but I mean, who knows. And then you have something like Droplets, which has been very popular lately. Even like branded lists that traditionally play Super Poly, for example, I noticed a lot of them have actually taken Super Poly out and they just play Droplets instead, or even something like Book of Eclipse. Really nice to have quick monster negation, especially something like, let's say, I don't know, like Appaloosa. Maybe your deck just can't handle that. And then you have Crossout, of course. We have a lot of hand traps in the format, which means Crossout will probably be a lot more useful. And of course, because when you expect a lot of mirrors, like let's say with Snake Eye, especially at a YCS level event too, when you expect most players to be running the best deck, then, you know, you're probably going to see more play of something like Crossout. And you, of course, saw play of something like Lullaby Obedience a couple YCSs back as well for that reason. And then you have Fenrir, you know, pretty good generic board wipe, going first and second. You also have Skill Drain, which was actually sided in several Snake Eye decks as well. So that's what I mentioned about earlier in terms of, you know, some Floodgates being more so played in the side, and that's why not as many board breaker counts maybe. Call by the Grave, nothing to say there. Change of Heart, kind of similar to like Tactics, you know, being able to take like your opponent's Appaloosa is actually pretty strong. Or even something like, let's say, the Bestial Dispatter, that is actually going to be pretty relevant for a lot of decks as well, if you can just take your opponent's Dispatter. So pretty strong. And of course, Deck Lockdown. This is kind of interesting because at one point in my previous Top Cup breakdown videos, this was usually more so in like the tech choice option because not many lists were running it, but this time around, Deck Lockdown, really strong against a lot of decks, like let's say like Tenpai Dragons. It's really good floodgate with, you know, when you hit some other floodgates, people are just going to flock to the next best one. So I guess this is where it comes. So in terms of most common generic extra deck monsters, of course, SP is always going to be number 1. Dark the Dark Charmer is the best Charmer out there. Technically, Hida the Charmer was also highly played, but I think that's a little bit more specific than Dark is, just because, you know, there's a lot more Dark, you know, based monsters in a lot of different decks. For example, Relinquish Anima, of course, just kind of takes up Link Karibo's spot basically after it got banned, and then you have something like IP, and Celine really is there just to go into like the access code combo lines. And then finally, in terms of, you know, quote-unquote tech choices, but not really, because Necro Valley is so common and everyone knows what it is, but there was one Tenpai Dragon list that was playing this as a side option, so I guess maybe that's something to consider as well if you're playing the deck. Alright guys, so that was it for the breakdown of the most played hand traps and board breakers and staples in YCS Rio. Hopefully that was helpful in terms of helping you prepare your list for whatever event that you have coming up. I'll definitely keep doing these kind of breakdowns, especially even at the regional level as well, as the format kind of slowly changes over time. So definitely a huge thanks to all of you for watching. Big thanks to my Patreons and sponsors as always for the continued support, and well, take care guys.